Hello, welcome to White Davy Gardening and Worm Farm. If you like my channel, please press the subscribe button. This bin is now ready for harvesting. So I'm going to show you how I harvest my castings. I have two ways that I separate my castings from the material that has not been processed. Well, not necessarily two ways, but two different types of sifter that I use. So one rotates and the other I have to hand sift. So like now when the time is too cold, I tend to use the hand sifter because my other sifter is too big and occupies too much space if I'm to put it in the garage. So I use the small hand sifter. So I'm going to take you through the process of separating the worm casting from the unfinished material. There are quite a lot of worms in here because I haven't finished extracting them yet. As you can see, I have a container here that I put food scraps in, and so the worms will gravitate towards it, and then I can just scoop out the worms. So I have been taking the worms out whenever they gather around the container. So let's see how many of them are gathered there, what's left. This worm bin has a lot of pot worms. You can see all those little white worms, right? So if you see white worms that are tiny, 3/4 of an inch roughly in length or smaller, and they're just thread-like, very skinny, then those are not composting worms, not the hatchlings of composting worms. They are actually just pot worms. It's just a small amount of worms that are left back in here, but I'm still trying to get out as many as I can because I don't like running them through my sifter. I feel sorry for them. Okay, so let's get to sifting. Okay, so to my right I have a bucket that, in case I find undesirables, sticks, stones, or anything of the sort, they go into that. Then I have a container that I'm sifting the castings in, my sifter, my hand sifter that I made, and then to my left I have the bucket that the unprocessed material goes into. These material contain quite a bit of sticks, unfortunately. I just love the way the castings feels. So nice and fluffy. And as I come across undesirables, I just take them out because I don't want to put them in the container that has the unprocessed material and the worms in it, because then I'm gonna have to keep dealing with them every time that I'm sifting castings. And I don't really want to have to deal with them every single time I'm sifting castings, because every time I create a new batch of castings, there's going to be some amount of sticks from leaves that were collected. And even though there are no smokers in my yard, sometimes I do collect leaves from others, and passers-by on the roadside might be smoking and just drop a cigarette butt out by the gate. So when you're raking, you'll end up with those sorts of undesirables ending up in your worm bin. Large material too, like for example mango seeds. If I come across those, I'll just take them out and put them in the bin where the unprocessed material and the worms go. If you don't want to spend a lot of energy sifting and you have to under-sift the worms, you can just gently, very gently, move the material from side to side with your hands, just like this. And I say very gently because you're going to have some amount of worms in there, and you don't want to rub the worms against the mesh because then you will be killing those worms. So you have to be rather gentle if you're using this method. I like my other sifter better because I just put the material in there and spin the sifter and it does the work for me, so I don't have to be doing this. Like I said, there is just not enough space in here to do this. So in the summer when it's warmer, then I use that sifter outside, but if I'm indoors, then this is how I separate the castings from the unprocessed material. So I'm going to go off camera and finish this process, and then I'll get back to you. I just want to show you guys something as I am going through. This is a mango skin, a mango seed, and I have been vermicomposting for a really long while now, and I always open the mango seeds to look in there, but for the first time I've ever seen so many worms in one mango seed. I mean, it's loaded with both red wrigglers and, as you can see on my gloves there, lots of potworms. It's just loaded with them in there. It's the first time I've ever been fortunate enough to see so many of them in one location in a mango seed. I'm betting maybe a little over 100 worms in here. Based on how many worms I have in a bundle when I'm selling a pound of worms, I'd say that is about 100 worms. So the worm bin is now empty. So this is the castings that I sifted. I'm sure if I spend the time and go through, I will find a few worms. I found a potworm. So I know that there are quite a bit of escapees in here. So now that I've harvested these castings, what's next? This castings that is in here, it came from 1.5 worm bin, those black trays. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this where I have the other castings that were harvested previously, I'm going to get a container, put some food scraps in it, and bury the container in here. And the purpose of that is for those worms that escape, made it through the sift, and for those cocoons that are in here, I'm going to allow 6 weeks for them to hatch and to make their way to the food scraps. There's a cocoon. It looks as if it just hatched because it is shrunken a bit. So I know that, and based on the color, it looks as if it just hatched. Yes, so I'm going to be extracting the worms that are in here, hatchlings and all. So after 6 weeks, I should be able to get out most of them. Of course, I can continue the process longer than 6 weeks because I definitely won't be using these castings until next spring or just before spring. Well, these ones definitely not going to be used in spring because I'm going to use the older set of castings first, because castings do have a shelf life of 3 years. So I try to use the older ones first. I don't really have castings that last that long anyway. I always get rid of them within 1 year. So that's what is going to be happening with the castings, and then it's going to go in storage. Now over here, this is the unprocessed material from the worm bin. So this is going to be used to restart the bin. So I'm going to get one of those pre-made food package for these worms. That's my bucket with food scraps and shredded leaves, shredded paper, and finished compost, and combine it with what is in here, and that is going to be my next worm bin. Now this is the first worm bin I am creating since I started labeling the shelf for my worms. So this is the first bin that I'm going to be able to keep accurate record of and say, okay, bin number 1, I did this too, I started it this date, etc, etc. So I'm looking forward to it. So if you enjoy this video and you would like to see more updates on how I look after my worms, then please take a moment to give me a thumbs up. You can leave a comment in the section below. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification for more updates like these. Thank you so much for watching and have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, a time for grow.